Um, um, I'm sure like the term cancel culture is like very like it's getting like it's becoming a very popular term these days because um people I guess people like sort of censor like people censor like I guess opinions or views that they don't like. So um yeah, so I'm gonna pull up an article right now that'll help explain it all. So I'm gonna do that right now. So this is an article from True North. It says veteran Toronto radio host canceled by the woke mob over bizarre on-air incident. So when I scroll down, it says a veteran Toronto radio host has become the latest victim of a um, says a veteran Toronto radio host has become the latest victim of a politically correct world gone mad and of a legacy media desperate to pander to the woke. True North has learned that 50-year radio professional Peter Shurman, who filled in as a talk show host at 640 Toronto for 5 years, was told last week he was being cancelled over a bizarre incident that occurred on September 24. So, this is a picture of Peter Sherman. So, yeah, so he was a radio host. And it says he was apparently given no rationale for the axing. Sherman was filling in on the drive time show when lesbian activist Farrah Khan came on to speak about how Smart Serve Ontario's training program will now include training to recognize sexual violence and drug-induced sexual assault. Khan is married to far left councillor Kristen Wong Tam. Prior to the interview, Sherman spoke of a naive young family member who stayed with him a few years back and who he had to caution about being careful when she endeavored to meet strangers in bars. He mentioned the potential to wind up in trouble when one orders a drink and leaves it sitting on the bar while going to the washroom. It's the kind of advice I wish I'd had before I naively allowed in a stranger interested in subletting my apartment while a student in Ottawa in 1978. The stranger who beat me tried to strangle me and left me near dead. Khan, the manager of Ryerson University's Office of Sexual Violence, barely answered his first question before proceeding to lambast Sherman on air. The person that is responsible for sexual violence is the person that is committing the sexual violence. This is a kind of naming and shaming, she said in an attempt to talk over Sherman. When Sherman attempted to explain what he meant, Khan hung up, insisting she hadn't been respected. The entire segment lasted barely 5 minutes, three and a half minutes. Immediately after, Khan took to Twitter in what appeared a campaign to shame Sherman. And here's a tweet from Farrah Khan. It says, shaking with rage after being on an awful radio show where the host thought it was okay to open up the conversation about alcohol facilitated sexual assault by blaming women for the harm they're subjected to. When I called him in, I was spoken down to and talked over. A mess. The Twitter lynch mob attacked almost immediately, praising Khan for standing up to a misogynist, The responses included this tweet alluding to possible violent retribution from someone who identified as Khan's uncle. So, and then here's a reply to her tweet. It says, it's from Mo Money, someone with that's the name of the user. It says, let your uncle know the name in DM. We can handle it the old way since he won't change his old ways. And then it says, hashtag family first. Khan chimed in repeatedly to followers, seemingly prepared to milk the incident for all it was worth. The following Friday, 6:40 Toronto morning, talk show host Greg Brady had Khan on his show to apologize. He claimed Shurman reacted in an adversarial way to Khan. Unfortunately, our guest just wasn't treated with the deference she should have been, Brady said, choosing not to say that Khan would not allow Shurman to explain himself. He said the incident moved to social media, which made the matter worse, choosing not to mention the fact that Khan and her followers allowed things to escalate and that Shurman stayed silent. Yeah, yes, social media made the matter worse, especially Twitter, because that's where like all the drama is now, like on Twitter. As most people on Twitter are just like are just on it to like rant who like or who've had like a bad day or something. Like they'll go on Twitter to like rant and all that. So like Twitter is pretty much like the platform for like yeah, like Twitter is pretty much the platform where all like the drama happens and where like things just where like people go to complain about stuff. So yeah, and then it says Brady alleged as a result, Khan was subject to rape threats and an outpouring of hate towards her and her family, not asking her to provide proof. We apologize as a station. We're very sorry that this occurred, he said. Immediately following the interview, Khan took to Twitter again. This morning's AM 640 publicly apologized for the unprofessional and harmful way host Peter Shurman treated me during an interview about alcohol facilitated sexual assault in the new Smart Serve training last Friday. A thread on what happened and the impact. And then it's the hashtag Me Too. And then she continues on with a thread. It says, the host spoke over me when I pushed back on his words, drowning out my voice with his, a common tactic used to assert power and control. Men in positions of power are not infallible and not entitled to treat others poorly or dismiss women's expertise. They are not. And the third tweet says, the way I was treated by the host had an impact on my life. My social media inboxes were flooded by men who were emboldened by the host's on air action slash tweets. The harassment, including rape threats, was chilling and has been reported. Words and actions matter. A week later, Shurman was canceled by station management. The Ford government subsequently removed him from the Tarion Warranty Corporation board following a complaint by an NDP MPP. Contacted for comment, Shurman said that as a lifelong radio pro and champion of sexual equality, he's devastated. He refused to comment further as he's in the process of looking into legal avenues available to him. Efforts to get a statement from 640 Toronto were unsuccessful. Khan, seemingly unfazed by the fallout of her Twitter campaign, indicated that while she was disappointed with the first interview, she was glad the station offered her the chance to come back to help listeners shape understandings about sexual violence. She said Mr. Shurman's employment status with AM 640 is a matter between him and his employer. And then it says Khan says she never requested that he be fired, only for an apology and better training on sexual violence be put in place at the station. So, uh, all right. So that's the end of the article, and yeah, that's pretty much an example of like cancel culture, where um, people are people are like are are being like fired, or they're being like censored because they have because I think because they said something that like the other person didn't agree with. So yeah, like this whole cancel culture thing is like becoming rampant, and yeah, and it's like those who it's like people who don't like agree with the with like the narrative, or like people who don't agree with the narrative, they're like being canceled out, or they're being censored. So like in the case of this article here, um it's talking about like a radio host, like a veteran radio host who's been fired because apparently he said something like the other person, like the guest of the show, like didn't like. So apparently like Peter Shurman ended up getting fired from the radio station because of the because like the guest he had on was like offended by something he said, and apparently she was saying that she ended up getting like some type of death threats or something like that because of like something he said about like I guess about something about like alcohol. So something like about alcohol induced violence, something like that. So yeah, and yeah, so that's the end of the article. So I can close that now. So yeah, like this whole cancel culture thing is like it's becoming like embraced these days, as it seems like people just censor or can't cancel out like those who don't necessarily agree with their opinion, or like the narrative. So so in the case of that article, that like the radio host Peter Sherman ended up getting fired for I guess insulting, or I guess offending the guest in some ways. So and he says he's like looking to take like legal action against I think I think it's against the radio station for firing him. So yeah, yeah, because I'm sure like there was no reason for him to be like fired. So like yeah, so I'm sure like it's one of those like constructive dismissal claims or something like that, where like it's like you get fired for like no reason. So so yeah, that was like everything I wanted to like that was everything I wanted to show. And so now yeah, because this whole cancel culture stuff, it's becoming very like rampant now. So yeah, yeah, that's why I want to like share that article, like show that article, so people get an idea of how it's of yeah, like how it's becoming like out of control. So yeah, that's everything I wanted to talk about. So now I'll be signing off.